your statement, sir, we hope will focus also on challenges of reparations, looking at issues around migration, with particular focus on Haiti. Thank you so much. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Madam Moderator. And first, before I speak, I would like to congratulate Ambassador June Suma on a new role, and also thank Dr. Epsi Campbell for leading us thus far. So thank you for the introduction. My participation on the panel is presented as the summary of the declaration created as part of the outcomes of the preliminary meeting on the third session of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, which took place in Lusaka, Zambia, from March 25th to the 27th, 2024. The preliminary meeting was curated by the International Coalition of People of African Descent, ICPAD, and the Pan-African Council, in partnership with the African Union, Secretariat of the Economic and Social Cultural Council, ECOSOCC, the Frantz Fanon Foundation, and Dalhousie University, Canada. My interventions represent the collective voices that organized, attended, contributed to, and drafted the declaration as recommendations that should be taken up for the second international decade for people of African descent. The primary objectives of the meeting were to foster purposeful dialogues and develop practical action plans in preparation for the third session. Moreover, to establish an effective working relationship with ECOSOCC in support of the AU's Agenda 2063 Aspiration 2, achieving an integrated continent, politically united, that is based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of an African Renaissance. For my talk today, I will briefly highlight 3 of the 5 essential topics explored and the recommendations proposed by the participants from the various working groups. We argue that these recommendations should be taken up as part of the mandate of the new decade. First, the implementation of the colonial reparative justice frameworks to advance the cause of black liberation in confronting racial capitalism. Second, addressing the continuous systematic violence against people of African descent in situations of forced migrations in the Mediterranean, Middle East, and Northern Africa, also known as the MENA regions. And lastly, true political and economic sovereignty for the first Black Republic, Haiti. Participants from the Reparations Working Group emphasized the imperative of redress as a means to confront historical injustice, dismantle systems of oppression, and work towards a more just and equitable world. For us, reparations should not be a binary opposite of decolonization. Rather, the two must be in sync with each other in articulating Black futures that are detached from Eurocentric epistemologies and ontologies. Decolonization asks 2 fundamental questions. What is required to reverse 500 years of history to make a new world? And how can we think of reparations and decolonizations as complementary processes rather than at odds? A genuine reparations decolonial movement can only be a project that is collective and political. Moreover, decolonial reparations should not be limited to financial recompense. Instead, it must seek justice and reconciliation in fostering futures that eradicate all forms of racism, discrimination, and exploitation. A decolonial reparations approach must include decolonizing the mind and institutions that reproduce coloniality. Decolonization of the mind starts with the education system. The mainstream education systems continue to devalue the mainstream education system continue to devalue people of African descent and our knowledge production. As mentioned earlier today by Dr. Sheila Walker, and one thing I've said in my time here for the last few days, I've met several educators, academics, and scholars. If we are thinking through a reparative justice framework, we need to also unpack the disciplines that we teach at those universities, because the very foundations of those disciplines is built on racial capitalism, aka the dismantling and dehumanizing of people of African descent. So that opens a gap for scholars to explore new ideas and also to implement indigenous ways of thinking of our Black futures, right? in our conversations on decolonizing the system and the international human rights mechanism, we must work, like I mentioned, or create alternative structures to advance our agenda. As the self-described black lesbian mother warrior poet Audre Lorde states, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." Essentially, decolonial reparations cannot occur using the same oppressive instruments grounded in racial capitalism. Rather, reparations must change the paradigm of domination rooted in capitalism. For instance, we can presently observe the limitations of international law in addressing the issue of reparative justice for people of African descent. As a counter, we should explore other legal mechanisms, such as third world approaches for international law. These necessary changes cannot be made without Africans and Afro-descendants and without stopping the endless war, particularly imposed on many states, such as Palestine, Haiti, and many others. Let us not forget that the fight against institutional and structural racism is a political struggle and that its success depends on the will of the international community. So then, we ask, when will that community finally take up its responsibility? Africans, Afro-descendants, and all racialized people are waiting. The second point we would like to highlight concerns migration. Forced displacement remains a critical issue in the Middle East and North Africa, including the Mediterranean, driven by a complex interplay of historical legacies, ongoing conflicts, environmental degradation, and the persistent effects of colonialism. An urgent need for a multi-pronged approach is necessary to address the root causes of forced migration, to dismantle the militarization of borders that perpetuate the extreme violence of Africans in situations of human mobility, and to foster collaborative solutions for displaced communities. The historical and ongoing impact of colonialism continues to fuel displacement, particularly for racialized minorities in Africa. Educational systems, and I repeat, educational systems, we have heard that theme, the role that education plays in that decolonizing piece from the very first day. Educational systems often fail to acknowledge this legacy, perpetuating a narrative that ignores the exploitation and resources extraction that contribute to the environmental devastation and economic instability of that region. The militarization of migration control violates human rights and the suffering of refugees and migrants. Militarized borders create a climate of fear and violence, hindering access to safe havens and essential services. I would now like to highlight 3 of our proposed recommendations. 1, transforming education. The UN Permanent Forum should urge the MENA region governments to develop and implement inclusive curricula at all levels, primary, secondary, and post-secondary, that accurately portray the history of colonialism and its enduring consequences. This curriculum should be developed by African scholars and educators to ensure a culturally sensitive and historically accurate perspective. 2, addressing root causes. MENA region states must commit to transforming policies that have a negative impact on their populations, particularly those impacting African communities. This includes addressing the climate crisis, promoting sustainable development, and fostering peaceful solutions to ongoing conflicts. 3, states must prioritize demilitarization of borders and ensure a secure and humane environment for people for human mobility. Law enforcement practices must be reformed to prevent violence against migrants and refugees. This comprehensive approach, combining educational reform, policy changes, border demilitarization, people of African descent support, and information dissemination is essential to address the root causes of forced migration, protecting the rights and dignity of displaced people. Now I'd like to move to the piece on Haiti. One of the primary objectives of the second decade, led by the Permanent Forum, must be to collaborate with the Haitian people to obtain genuine and political and economic sovereignty for Haiti. The organizations gathered in Lusaka for the meeting echoed the voices and demands for Haitian civil society and social movement regarding their autonomy. I'd like to touch on some of the recommendations that we propose. First, we as a collective support the efforts of the Haitian social movement and grassroots organizations in getting reimbursement of illegal debt imposed by France in 1825. Furthermore, the return of the stolen gold reserved by the US in 1914 and reparations for enslavement, colonization, and illegal occupation. 2, we demand political and economic support to establish independent People's Tribunal for all crimes committed against Haitians from 1914 until today. We reject the adoption of the UNC Resolution 2699, which imposes multinational security support mission in coordination with the Haitian National Police, the external interference of foreign states, international institutions and organizations, and informal intergovernmental groups. 4, we call for immediate and definitive suspension of arms suppliers in Haiti. And finally, we call for solution to Haiti's multidimensional crisis that requires only Haitian-led initiatives. We urge the international community to consider and respectfully consider the Montana Agreement as a comprehensive Haitian solution to the crisis. To conclude, we firmly believe, that's the International Coalition for People of African Descent and the Pan-African Council, that the 3 underlying themes must be addressed in the second decade, or its existence will be futile. While we acknowledge the significance of the second decade, it is essential that it's built on concrete actions. As individuals of African descent, we possess a deep understanding of the issues at hand, and it is now time to approach them from a decolonial perspective. Failing to do so will only perpetuate neocolonialism fueled by racial capitalism, which further dehumanizes black lives. I'm going to end right now. As Amy Césaire states, the thingification of black people will continue unless those violent systems are disrupted and reimagined. We have the academics, we have the history, we have that as a people. Within this space, we could create new worlds. And it sounds far-fetched, but it's very possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Eugene. I mean, what a forceful presentation. Just to say that this whole idea of decolonizing the mind, I really like that whole idea. I also want to just recall your last comment about disruption and reimagining. It's crucial that we do that. We don't have more of the same moving forward, that we reimagine what we want to see in the future. So thanks again for